In 1914, the British government staked £2 million for control over Persian oil, just as the Royal Navy switched from coal to oil, forever changing the calculus of war. This wasn't random, it was a chain reaction. How did a single policy gamble ignite a century of global dependence and political upheaval? And why does the real turning point in oil's rise to power appear much later than you think? A turning point we will reveal in Act 3. By the end of this video, you'll see exactly how oil quietly rewrote the rules of international politics. Quick recap: one bold decision, a new fuel, and far-reaching consequences. Keep listening, because next, we will trace the decisions that turned a resource into a source of state power. Winston Churchill stepped into the Admiralty in 1911 with a single urgent question. How could Britain's navy outpace every rival on the seas? The answer, he argued, lay not in the coal that had powered British dominance for decades, but in oil, a fuel twice as energy-dense, capable of driving ships faster and farther, and nearly smokeless under full steam. At Churchill's urging, the Royal Commission on Fuel and Engines convened in 1912, gathering testimony from engineers, naval officers, and government officials. Their conclusion, delivered in March 1913, was blunt. The future of the Navy depended on oil. Yet, Britain faced a glaring vulnerability. Unlike coal, oil did not flow from British soil. The Admiralty's own projections showed the Navy's oil needs in 1912 would be 225 times what they were just a decade before. Churchill warned Parliament that if oil supplies faltered, so would the flow of everything else Britain relied on, from food to raw materials. The solution came from the Anglo-Persian Oil Company, then struggling to stay afloat. In 1914, the government struck a deal, £2 million for a 51% stake and a 20-year guarantee of 40 million barrels. This contract was more than a purchase, it was a state-backed gamble. The fate of the world's largest navy to a single foreign oil field. Churchill called it the fateful plunge. The British fleet, and by extension the empire, would now depend on oil secured by direct government investment. The logic was clear. Technological advantage required national control over energy, no matter the risks. That choice set a chain of consequences, a cascade from decision to dependency to power projection. The immediate risks were obvious, but the larger transformation would unfold next, and the pivotal turning point appears later in the film. Artillery thundered across the Western Front, but behind the lines, another battle played out. One was fought over barrels and supply convoys. By 1917, the British and French armies relied on fleets of trucks and tanks, each one thirsty for fuel. Supply officers scrambled to keep up. Diaries from the front describe desperate scenes. Tank crews stranded in mud, waiting days for fuel, while infantry pushed forward on foot. In November 1917, entire Mark IV tank battalions stalled during the Passchendaele offensive, immobilized not by enemy fire, but by empty fuel drums. Makeshift depots sprang up in ruined villages, and mobile tankers rumbled through shell holes, risking everything to deliver oil to the front. Quick recap: this was not a simple supply problem, it was a strategic vulnerability. Logistics reports from the final year of the war show that by 1918, 60% of Allied mechanized units depended on oil. The old system of coal depots and horse-drawn wagons could no longer keep up. Commanders learned quickly, a modern army moved only as fast as its fuel supply. The lessons were written in the mud and chaos of the trenches. Victory now hinged on energy, not just strategy. The scramble for oil in wartime set a precedent that would echo far beyond the armistice, shaping how nations planned, fought, and survived in a new era. And that dependence would force states to think in terms of supply lines and control, a shift that leads directly into the geopolitics of oil. Oil wealth can transform a country's fortunes overnight, but the path that follows depends on how that money is managed. In Saudi Arabia, oil accounts for between 80 and 90% of government revenue, a concentration that has shaped every aspect of state power. Since the first commercial discovery at Dammam in 1938, Saudi rulers used oil rents to fund military expansion, social programs, and grand infrastructure projects. By the 1970s, ledgers show as much as 40% of windfall profits directed to arms deals, while social spending accounted for less than 1/3. With so much revenue flowing directly to the state, the monarchy never needed to rely on broad-based taxation. That independence from taxpayers insulated the royal family from political pressure, enabling an enduring system of centralized control. Quick recap: channeling oil rents straight to the state reduces taxation and concentrates power. Norway, by contrast, faced its own oil windfall in the North Sea, but chose a different approach. In 1990, Parliament established the Government Pension Fund Global, known simply as the Oil Fund. Its mandate was clear: invest oil profits transparently for the benefit of future generations. By 2023, the fund's assets had grown to over $1.5 trillion, and every transaction is published for public scrutiny. Norwegian policymakers insisted on strict rules. Oil money cannot be spent directly in the annual budget, and ethical guidelines govern investments. This design aimed to avoid the resource curse, where easy money can erode institutions and accountability. The result is a stark contrast. Two oil-rich states, one channeling wealth through royal patronage, the other through transparent democratic institutions. Each model reveals how the architecture of oil revenue can shape a nation's destiny. Next, we examine how those revenue choices reshaped foreign policy, domestic stability, and the projection of power abroad. Iran's oil fields once stretched under nearly all the country's southern deserts, but the profits rarely reached beyond the boardrooms of London. In 1901, the Darcy Concession gave British interests exclusive rights over Persian oil for 60 years in exchange for a mere 16% royalty. By the 1940s, contracts like these defined what became known as the Seven Sisters, an alliance of Western oil giants including BP, Exxon, and Shell, who carved up global reserves with the backing of their home governments. Iranian workers toiled beside pipelines, while company ledgers, audited in English, kept the true balance hidden from local officials. Quick recap: profits flowed abroad, labor stayed local. This imbalance bred resentment. In 1951, Mohammad Mossadegh, Iran's elected prime minister, nationalized the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company. British executives called it theft and lobbied furiously in Whitehall in Washington. Declassified CYA cables detail how BP's Basil Jackson and other oilmen pressed American and British intelligence to act. Operation Ajax launched in August 1953. CIA and MI-26 operatives funneled millions into Tehran, staged protests, and bribed army officers. Tanks rolled through the capital. Mossadegh was arrested. The Shah returned to power, and Western companies regained access to the oil fields, this time under a consortium arrangement, but again with the lion's share of profits flowing abroad. The coup restored Western control, but it also fueled a lasting backlash. Iran's brief experiment with sovereignty ended under foreign pressure, exposing the limits of the concession era and the lengths to which oil interests and their government allies would go to protect their grip. The world had seen how corporate power, when threatened, could summon political force to redraw the map. That intervention in Tehran was not the final act, and the consequences would ripple across the region and around the world. In September 1960, 5 oil-producing nations, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, and Venezuela, met in Baghdad and formed OPEC. Their goal was simple: end the era of Western oil companies setting prices from boardrooms in London and New York. By the early 1970s, OPEC controlled nearly 80% of the world's oil exports, but its true leverage was still untested. That changed in October 1973. With war raging in the Middle East, OPEC ministers, led by Saudi Arabia's Ahmed Zaki Yamani, voted to cut production and to impose an embargo on countries supporting Israel. Shipments to the USA and several European states slowed to a trickle. Within weeks, the price of oil jumped from $3 a barrel to over $12 a barrel, a fourfold surge that rippled through every sector of the global economy. Gas stations posted handwritten signs that read, "No fuel today." Inflation soared. Factories in Europe and the USA cut shifts or closed. Quick recap: a decision to cut supply caused a price spike. The price spike caused widespread disruption, and that disruption spread through industry, transport, and finance. The shock did not end there. In 1979, as revolutions swept through Iran, oil prices doubled again, reaching $40 a barrel and slicing another 10% from global supply. OPEC's coordinated action had turned oil into a geopolitical weapon, showing that producer unity could upend the world's economic order overnight. That coordinated price power would go on to reshape alliances and influence foreign policy in the decades that followed. In August 1990, Iraqi troops crossed into Kuwait, and within days, 1/5 of the world's oil reserves stood at risk. U.S. commanders working with coalition allies mobilized one of the largest military deployments since World War II, not only to drive Iraqi forces out, but to secure the oil fields and the shipping lanes that fed global markets. Satellite images from the Pentagon tracked burning wells and troop movements, and UN data showed that a prolonged disruption could send global oil prices soaring. The swift victory in early 1991 sent a message. Military power could defend the flow of oil, and the world's dependence made those flows a permanent security concern. Quick recap: a single invasion threatened a large share of global oil, and that threat triggered a major military response. After the Cold War, pipelines emerged as the new front lines. Russian officials, inheriting vast Soviet-era networks, realized that control over energy infrastructure could achieve what armies once did. In 2006, Russia shut off gas supplies to Ukraine in a pricing dispute, cutting off heat and electricity as far west as Poland and Slovakia. European Union records from that winter detail how 25 billion cubic meters of gas failed to reach its destination, and technicians in Kyiv scrambled to keep hospitals running. The pattern repeated in 2009, when another cutoff left millions in the dark during sub-zero temperatures. Pipelines, not tanks, shaped the balance of power from Moscow to Brussels. Infrastructure became leverage, and the stakes moved from battlefields to the valves and terminals that keep economies running. Quick contrast: the front line moved from soldiers to steel pipes and gas valves. Next, we will trace how producers used pipelines and coordinated production to turn energy into political pressure. Oil still underpins every global supply chain, military strategy, and diplomatic standoff. Even as renewables rise, 3 billion barrels move every month, binding governments, markets, and lives. Understanding these systems is not history. It is how we read today's headlines. The real power lies not in the barrel, but in the structure built around it.